Get your hands on stylish t-shirts, hoodies, and more at wearbuff.com. That's wearbuff.com. And make sure to use the promo code TWB at checkout for 20% off your first order. Stay Buffalo proud with Wear Buff. The Buffalo Bills dismantled the Jacksonville Jaguars by a score of 47-10. We're breaking it down this week on the Wandering Buffalo podcast.
You're now listening to the Wandering Buffalo podcast with your host, Justin Goddard.
Bills Mafia. Welcome into another episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast, a show on the Buffalo FamBase podcast network. My name is Justin, and I'm your host on this wonderful night. Just got done watching the Bills take down the Jaguars 47-10, and I'll be honest, this is the first game of the season that I haven't had to work or had some sort of obligation through part of the game. First one, start to finish, that I've been able to sit down and watch live, enjoy the full thing, and what a wonderful game it was for that. There's so many games watching the Bills that they're shooting themselves in the foot, dumb mistakes, games that should be, well out of reach, that go well into the fourth quarter of just straight stress. And be honest, I have a ton of stress going on in my life right now, and this was just what I needed. Just sit down and enjoy a good old 40 burger. This was a really fun game for me, and I'll be honest, I had a lot of questions going into this game, just kind of stemming from some of the recent history with the Jaguars, some weird matchup stuff. I know there's, layers built into it of last year's game being Jacksonville having back-to-back weeks in London and kind of botched travel arrangements by the Bills and whatnot. All that aside, it's just been a weird team for the Bills in recent years. And kind of adding on to that, the fact that they started the season 0-2 and, for all intents and purposes, this was a borderline must-win game for them. In this day and age in the NFL, dropping 0-3 to start the season, I mean, you have next to no chance of making the playoffs. And for a team in the Jaguars that are kind of loaded with a whole bunch of talent, I was just kind of expecting back to the wall, nothing to lose, leave it all on the field, shot for shot kind of game. And hey, I don't really know what's going on down in Jacksonville, but they did not come out with the fire that I was expecting them to. And for the Bills, this game kind of felt like, you're at work on a Friday and the boss says, whatever work you got left for the day, once you finish that up, you can get out of here and go home. Or like, you're sitting in school and the teacher says, if nobody has any more questions, we can get out of here. And that was like the first half for the Bills. So it's kind of another game where stat-wise, Josh Allen had a very good day. 23 for 30, 263 yards, 4 touchdowns. But the caveat of that is we had Mitch Trubisky finishing the game, and he had something like 247 of those yards in the first half. So, and it's not like this. It was like Jacksonville flipped this switch and was a whole different team, and we couldn't do anything we wanted to. It was kind of just a coasting out the game type deal. So, I mean, this game to me was very much, hey, we went out and we took care of business in the first half. Let's get out of here. And not the most riveting second half, but I mean, the defense was still coming up, making plays, keeping Jacksonville to 10 points the whole game. There was certainly some more opportunities as we got into a little bit of garbage time. There was a pass breakup in the end zone. But again, we're talking, our backup defense was in there. We had Codrington out there, Elam, had, I think it was Casey Toohill get a strip sack. So, I mean, ending the game with a 37-point win, coasting it out with backups in, getting some of our young death players some reps. I mean, I know it's not, a hugely important situation or anything, but I talked a little bit in the preseason about how much I love the preseason because we have these guys that we can get excited for the future that might not necessarily be starting year one. Thinking of like Cedric Van Granger, Javon Solomon, some of these younger guys that once you get out of preseason, barring injuries, they're not really getting a chance to see the field. So I think it's really cool to be able to end the game that way and just coast out the night. To touch a little bit on Josh Allen, I mean, he looked pretty well unstoppable. In the air, he was pretty much doing whatever he wanted. Against the zone, ripping them up. They switched to man. He hurt him on the ground, 6 carries for 44 yards. And most of those kind of being for first downs or some sort of like critical gain. The running backs themselves, not like a crazy prolific game on the ground, but when you factor in the passing game that they're involved in as well, just an overall very productive game from the backs. James Cook, 11 carries for 39 yards and a touchdown. He also added 4 catches on 5 targets for 48 yards. And it ends up being kind of a non-play because I think it was the immediate play after ends up being a touchdown anyways. But boy, did he sure have a beautiful wheel route that the ball went right through his hands. That would have been either a touchdown or like down at the 1 yard line. I'm not going to focus on that too much because he has made all kinds of other plays in the passing game. It seems like his hands are a bit better this year, but the questions are going to start coming up again, especially, in a tighter game or if the immediate aftermath of that play wasn't a touchdown. We'll see. It was a beautiful pass. You'd love to see him bring it in. Ray Davis adds 22 yards and a touchdown on 7 carries. Not much in the passing game for him. Just 1 catch ends up being for a yard. And then Ty Johnson was also involved in the run game and the passing game. 3 carries for 18 yards. 3 catches on 3 targets, 28 yards and a touchdown. So, I mean, ground stats wise, nothing really, super crazy here from the running backs. Kind of like 4.5 yards per carry when you put them all together. But seeing what Joe Brady is able to do to incorporate them into the passing game and the running backs being productive there, super fun to see that. And kind of the running game has been overall pretty effective, like as needed. We saw a ton of it last week. We saw kind of this week be a little bit more the quick passing game operating as the run game. So we didn't need a ton from the running backs in that department. Khalil Shakir, another awesome day. Another super efficient day. I mean, they target this dude and he catches the ball. 6 catches on 6 targets, 72 yards and a touchdown. And before I get too far into the receivers, I just want to say this is another thing that I was kind of skeptical with going into the year of, I saw the vision of the everybody eats, understood it. I like it on paper. You don't see a ton of teams going with this approach. And I kind of had that, who's the go-to guy if we need it in the moment. And thus far this season, we haven't really seen the need for that. I'd say the closest thing to that has been Shakir, and he delivers at every turn. Super excited to see what he is going forward. in particular, his yards after catch. I mean, the first guy's not bringing him down in most cases. He looks like a pinball out there, just getting all the tough yards. It's quick, super fun. 10 receptions, or 10 different players getting receptions in this game. Keon Coleman getting one catch on one target, 24 yards for a touchdown. Kincaid having 3 catches on 5 targets, 41 yards and a touchdown. We already mentioned Ty Johnson and James Cook touchdowns. Curtis Samuel, 3 for 3, 22 yards. Matt Collins, 1 for 2 for 16 yards. Dawson Knox gets a catch for 7 yards. And Valdes-Scantling also 1 for 7 yards. So just kind of looking at the distribution and, just what the Bills said they were going to do. Everybody's eating. And it's just leading to a really efficient offense. Josh Allen isn't trying to force anything. The ball's going, to the open guy. The receivers are making plays with the ball after they catch it. And, thus far, it's working out really well. Now, I will say I don't really know what to make of the opponents the Bills have played thus far. I think Miami was still up there as, projected to be one of the better teams throughout the season. Obviously, the landscape is different now with the Tua injury, and we'll see what happens there. I didn't really expect Arizona to be a great team this year. Jacksonville has been kind of perennially up there, but not kind of in that elite stratosphere. Still pretty early in the season. So everything's working great for now. We'll see how it goes throughout the season. If there needs to be a pivot off of this everybody eats strategy or anything like that. But for right now, just it's super fun to watch. It's really cool being able to watch every play and just really have no idea where the ball's going to go. And you see somebody pop up and you're like, who the hell was that? Oh, cool. Knox was involved there. Kincaid, Matt Collins. It's super cool, and I hope the approach keeps working. I think that we're likely to see a lot more of this start happening in the NFL because you're getting these marquee receivers and cool, it's great to have 2 of these, superstar receivers on your team until it's time to pay both of them. And, you have a $50 million quarterback and 2 receivers that want $30 million each year, and all of a sudden you got 2/3 of your cap tied up between 3 players. Tough to field the rest of the team building in that fashion. Defensively, I mean, what can I really say here? Got to keep giving my props to Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich. I mean, again, we can talk about the injuries on this team, and it's not just injuries. It's all defensive players, and it's all key starters. And you're talking Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Taron Johnson. Those are 3 of the biggest, arguably the biggest pieces on defense for this team. And they went down, and this defense hasn't really missed a beat. Just big plays coming up from all kinds of players across this defense, going anywhere from Von Miller to Cam Lewis to Jamarcus Ingram. Damar Hamlin with an interception today, his first career interception. To see that kind of all come together of what happened a couple of years ago, is this guy ever going to play football again, to starting in meaningful games, not just contributing, but an interception. Super cool to see that whole journey back. Christian Benford, Rasul Douglas, just a couple dogs out there. I mean, both of these dudes are great in pass coverage. They come up, they hit. They have kind of like this vicious attitude when they're getting involved in the run defense, just coming up and making tackles. We saw a little bit of Kyrie Elam out there. He had a pass breakup today. He had a tackle for loss on a screenplay. So kind of cool seeing, him as the cornerback 3 right now get in there and get a chance to make a play. We saw Casey Toohill sack. We saw Von Miller get a sack. Just all kinds of contributions on this defense. AJ Epinesa with the sack. Jamarcus Ingram, just all over the place. I think Javon Solomon even got one in there. And this is against, like I said, a team that, we're talking a couple of years ago was going toe-to-toe with the Chiefs for, I believe it was the AFC Championship game, like sniffing at a chance of going to the Super Bowl. So, again, I don't know what to make of this Jaguars team now, because it seemed like that was kind of their peak and they can't figure out a way to win a ball game right now. But the talent still exists there, and they've done some reloading. They've brought in weapons. I don't know. I don't think they're a great team. Their record would indicate that they're not. But to come out here and have that kind of performance against Trevor Lawrence and some of these weapons on that offense, just hats off to Bobby Babich, Sean McDermott, that defense. They're doing their damn thing out there, and they don't really give a hoot that they're shorthanded. I thought it was a pretty fun moment in the game where they kind of brought up the graphic of some of the players on this defense and where the Bills were able to find them. And you had Cam Lewis being an undrafted, Jamarcus Ingram undrafted, Christian Benford being a 6th-round pick. There's a couple more on there. But just being able to build this team. Bale Inspector was another one on there, 7th-round pick. Just being able to build this team and being able to rely on the depth when it comes time to, I think kind of speaks volumes to the continuity of this team and the drafting and developing and being able to find some of these guys in the late rounds, because that's what it takes to build a really competitive roster year over year. And kind of look at some of these guys that are coming around in their 3rd, 4th year that have been with the team and just putting in the work and buying into the system. And all of a sudden, I don't feel good about seeing Cam Lewis or Jamarcus Ingram seeing meaningful snaps, but they get out there and they're playing at a high level. And I look at guys like that, if we're a team that wants to jump the gun and fire the coach and fire the GM because we haven't gotten over the hump, guys like that don't stick around. They don't get a chance to stay with the organization very often. They're overhauling rosters. They're bringing in their own guys. And yeah, some of these guys would stick around for a year or two after that. But most of these guys aren't really getting a ton of opportunity most places in the league. And I think it's really cool to see them develop over time from these undrafted guys who, we barely know their names, into guys that are out there starting making plays. And kind of leads me into Buffalo Joe getting his first NFL regular season action out there today. And just another player that's super cool to see. And yes, it's by, some force of some injury misfortune with Milano and Bernard being out and, having to lean into the depth early in the season. But again, that's another player that, maybe we don't see a ton from him this year, but he's able to get up and do something on special teams and stick around for training camp next year. And maybe in 2-3 years, That's the next, local product, unsigned player that is able to come in, put in the work, and all of a sudden we're getting meaningful contributions from them a couple of years down the line. So super exciting game overall. Tons to like from this game. And honestly, can't really point my finger too much at things that I didn't like. We did have Tyler Bass miss PAT. That one got blocked. I'm not going to read into that one too much. He made his other 2 field goals from the day. He made all the other PATs, and there's a lot of them. Punting, I think it was one punt that we had from Sam Martin. Looked like a pretty good one. Took like 5 minutes real time for the play to actually happen. There's the whistle didn't blow, so the play couldn't start, and then there was a penalty. I think he kicked it 3 times. Maybe the refs just wanted him to get his reps in because he wasn't doing anything else all game. But yeah, not really much to put in the dislike column here. One of the most encouraging things I would have to say I got from this game was Von Miller. And I had some severe doubts here as well. Just, with his age, coming off the injury, he looked absolutely cashed out last year. And he has at least 1 sack in each of the first 3 games. Kind of seems to be thriving in this rotational pin your ears back kind of role that we have him in. And that's what Von Miller was originally brought here for. And I mean, he played a much higher percentage of snaps, but Brandon Beane brought him in to be the closer and to get after the quarterback when it mattered most. And I don't think this game was ever really much in question, but there was a few instances where he was close and it was kind of on a pivotal play, and then he did end up getting a sack. So just being able to get after the quarterback, cause some pressure, and get some of those sacks. I mean, he's on pace for a 17-sack season. I don't think that'll happen, but if we ended up with, say, 10 sacks from Von Miller, some of them being, game on the line, minute and a half left, and your opponent is facing a 3rd and 8 and he gets a sack, it's a lot more than I was expecting from him this year, and I think that's it was like one of the key pieces for me of outside of Greg Rousseau, who's going to be getting consistent pressures and sacks. And if that can be Von Miller, super psyched about it. Even better if he can do it in limited snaps, because the run game was never really his forte, right? So keep getting after the quarterback. Got Groot on the other side. Absolutely love him. He's great in the run game. Still kind of waiting for a little bit more pressures from him from this season, just kind of on a more consistent basis. But yeah, overall, just really nothing to complain about with this game. Do have another primetime game coming up this coming week. It's going to be a Sunday night game against the Ravens. Listen, the NFL is kind of all over the place right now, so I don't really know what to make about a lot of teams in the NFL. I mean, we're headed to Baltimore to take on the Ravens, and they're sitting at 1-2. And the Ravens are a team that I have as one of the, biggest competitors in the AFC. But if you asked me at the beginning of the season, I would have said, the Bengals were one of the top teams in the AFC. As of the recording of this podcast, they now sit at 0-3. Just a lot of weird stuff happening in the NFL through the first few weeks. It's kind of hard to tell who's real and who's not right now. But I do see the Ravens as one of the real teams out there. Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, dangerous on the ground. If there's a spot on this defense to exploit, it's our run defense. So we'll see what happens. I feel like the Bills usually, McDermott and Babbage usually cook up a pretty good game plan for like these marquee running backs. The previous times playing against Lamar Jackson, they seem to have a pretty good plan how to contain him and limit what he does on the ground, really make him beat you with his arm. So we'll see what happens. Super excited for it. Bills are 3-0. Great start to the season. If you asked me at the beginning of the year, this first stretch of games, I would have been hoping for us to come away 3-1 through the first 4. So I mean, we're already at minimum hitting that 3-1. I thought, between the Dolphins and the Jaguars, there would have been a little bit more difficult matchups. And again, I don't know. I don't know if those teams are just less good than I expected them to be, or if the Bills have really just not missed a beat and they're playing a whole different brand of football at a super high level. And I think I'm getting towards the latter. We need a little bit more sample size, but it's kind of been all phases, offense, defense, special teams, kind of all playing great complementary football. They look like they're having fun. They look like they're a bunch of brothers out there just having a blast. So we'll see. Super fun season thus far. Like I said, huge test coming up against the Ravens next week. If you did make it this far, as always, ask that you like, share, subscribe, drop a comment about how you feel about this game below. All these things really help out the algorithm, help us make sure we're getting out every week. Check out the website, wanderingbuff.com. We got some merch up there. Jake's doing some great stuff with the website. Special thanks, as always, to Jake for producing this show, because without Jake, you would not be seeing me right now. And thank you again to all the fans tuning in. Appreciate you listening to me talk football. Like I said, drop a comment so we can have some conversations about what you think about the team so far. But until next week, when we'll be talking about the Ravens, as always, go Bills.